A lot of time has been spent on the insurance policy in relation to Northern Ireland. Not enough time has been spent on the other really big issue, which is what does the future relationship with the EU look like? And as we're running out of time, and as I suspect the Prime Minister is not going to be able to get unity in her party, there is this risk that she'll go for a blind or vague Brexit, which is sort of vague words about the future relationship that don't tell us where we're going.
You say it's a risk, but it was always inevitable in the process, wasn't it? The current negotiations are, and always were meant to be, about the divorce settlement, the withdrawal. They were never going to be about the future trade relationship. We've known that for months.
Well, you say that, Nick. I mean, remind yourself that the Prime Minister herself said at the beginning of the process that by this stage, we would have the detail. So at this stage, to back up and say, well, sorry, we've sort of run out of time. And anyway, I don't know whether my own party would agree it. And therefore, I'll sort of try and bounce something vague through Parliament is completely unacceptable. The Article 50 process, Article 50 itself says that the withdrawal agreement has to have regard to the future relationship. The two can't be separated. And what you can't say to Parliament is, we don't really know where this is going to end up. Just back it and see what happens.
You're rather assuming the outcome, aren't you? Isn't it the duty of Her Majesty's loyal opposition to help the Prime Minister in the last few crucial days to get a deal and not avoid an outcome which you've said would be catastrophic?
No, Nick, it's not the duty of the opposition to back the Prime Minister come what may. It's the duty of the opposition, as we have done, to set out what do we think the objectives should be, what do we think the future relationship should be. What we can't be expected to do now with a gun to our head is back the Prime Minister, whatever she brings back, however good or bad the deal is, and without the detail around it. That's not opposition, that's surrender.
Now, what we know, I mean, we don't know for a fact, of course, until the deal is finally done, if it is done, but what we know coming out of Brussels, coming out of Westminster, is that the deal is likely to be a form of customs union, precisely what you've called for, at least in the short run. Again, I put it to you, wouldn't it be responsible to back that, even if you think in the longer run you could improve on that and do something better?
Well, Nick, the government's approach to a customs arrangement is that it is only to be used as an insurance policy, as a last resort for as short a period as possible, only for the backstop. Labour Party has said we need a customs union as part of the future relationship to protect manufacturing. There's a massive difference between those two positions.
Well, there is indeed, but what you're asking for is not on offer, and if I were to wave a magic wand and make you Brexit Secretary now, there is no way that you could achieve in the time currently available the sort of customs union, with the exception of free movement, with the right to negotiate your own trade deals. So isn't it responsible to back what might come out and then say, yeah, sure, we want an election and we want to do a better thing in the longer term?
Well, Nick, the first question is a customs union with the EU something capable of being negotiated? But that's something I've discussed in Brussels. I'm on my way to Brussels right now. And so, yes, I do believe that's a negotiation that can be had. Are we running out of time? Well, if we are, that, I'm afraid, is the government's fault. After all,
but it doesn't matter whose fault it is, does it, Sir Keir? Because what matters is for the country and what's in the country's interest.
But Nick, what you're really putting to me is this, that because the Prime Minister called a snap general election at the beginning and wasted several months, because she didn't get agreement, wasted more months, she's now got to the end of the process, and you, the opposition, have just got to back whatever she brings back.
Well, what I'm putting to you is what your own MPs, some of them at least, are putting to you. Lisa Nandy, all MPs owe it to the country to try and find a way through this, that she's one of your MPs. Caroline Flint, I believe if there's a reasonable deal that stops us crashing out with no deal, we shouldn't rule it out. Gareth Snell, another Labour MP, makes the same point.
Yeah, is there a deal that the majority in Parliament would back? I think if it had as its components a customs union and a single market deal, I think you might get a majority. But this proposition that with a gun to our head we must simply support whatever the Prime Minister manages to cobble together is simply not acceptable.
So talk us through what happens when and
there's
if
no national
this is
interest in
defeated.
backing a bad deal.
OK, just to put the question for me, the Prime Minister is clear. She says that if she brings the deal back, if Parliament rejects it, the only alternative is no deal. So just spell out for us, if you would, what would be the process? We're on the morning after Parliament rejecting a deal the Prime Minister has done. What then?
I do not accept that leaving without a deal is the only alternative. The legislation we've already passed requires the Prime Minister to come back to Parliament and to make a statement about what she proposes to do if her deal doesn't go through. But if the vast majority in the House of Commons say we are not prepared to leave without a deal, and I think it is the vast majority, then the Prime Minister does not have permission, nor can she simply exit without a deal. We say that there should be a general election. This would be a huge failure of the negotiating strategy.
I think one of your colleagues in the Shadow Cabinet described that as, quotes, Looney Tunes territory.
Well, there are all... I mean, look, in any world where these negotiations have failed as profoundly as they would have done, there ought to be a general election. And the only thing saving the Prime Minister would be the Fixed Term Parliament Act. Assume that doesn't happen, then Parliament could do a number of things. It could say to the Prime Minister, you should negotiate, you should seek more time to negotiate according to a mandate which the majority in Parliament back. It could, and this was what we decided at our Labour Party conference, it could decide there's a question that needs to go back to the people. But what we can't do is accept the proposition that we simply leave without a deal if we don't back whatever the Prime Minister cobbles together.
So when you're in Brussels today and you're asked for what you want people in the EU to do, you will say frustrate the Prime Minister, make it harder for her to get a deal, and then maybe Labour gets the general election it wants.
No, Nick, I've been going backwards and forwards to Brussels over the last 2 years. I've had lots and lots of meetings. My aim has never been to frustrate the process. It's to understand where the challenges are, to understand where there's room to move forward. And in today in particular, it's to make clear that something that is vague is not something which should be put to Parliament to seek its approval.
So Keir